One. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is McKaylee. I work at Tattered Cover Bookstore, and first and foremost, I want to say thank you. Thank you for joining our virtual community. Thank you for supporting local independent bookstores. Thank you for shopping locally. It means more to us than you will ever know. We would not have gotten through the last year or the last 50 years without your help and support, because Tattered Cover turns 50 years old this year in 2021, which is an amazing feat for a bookstore. And we owe a majority of that success to you. So thank you so much for that. Before I go any further, closed captioning is enabled on this video for anyone who might want it or need it. There's a black bar at the bottom of the screen with a button labeled CC on it. Click that button and closed captioning is enabled should you want it or need it. For those of you who are joining us outside of the Denver metro area, as virtual events are wont to do, Tattered Cover is a local independent bookstore with 4 locations in the Denver metro area, soon to be 5. We have our brand new Stanley Marketplace location opening up in Aurora, for those of you who are local and know the area. And our Westminster store is gonna be hopefully opening later this year, I think August, September. It's a busy year for us, but thank you for your support. And we, like I said before, couldn't do it without you, but we're bringing bookstores to all areas of Denver, and we're very excited for it. You can keep up on all that updates on our social media channels or subscribe to our email newsletter. You can also check out our website at tatteredcover.com and get all of your bookish needs there. Seriously, you can order online from us. It still shops local, and you don't have to leave your house if you don't want to. Stay in your pajamas and shop. Keep up that habit from COVID. Totally do it. We can help you out there. Also on our website is all of our virtual events at tatteredcover.com/events. You can check out all of the upcoming events that we have. We have one tomorrow at 2 o'clock from Garden to Glass about fermentation, and also, especially now that it's summertime and people are getting outside, this is a perfect book. So check that out and other events. And all of our past events are on our YouTube channel, which is what you're watching us on right now. So thank you for that. But the event that we have tonight, this is something very special, and I'm very excited. You guys are going to get a bit of the taste of it, and it's just such an honest and great book, and the title alone tells you everything. And Now I Spill the Family Secrets by Margaret Kimball, and she's going to be in conversation with David James Poussant. And I'm so excited to talk to the pair of them and have them talk to each other. Just a little bit about our guest tonight. David James is the author of the story collection The Heaven of Animals, in print in 5 languages, winner of the GLCA New Writers Award and a Florida Book Award, longlisted for the Penn/Robert W. Bingham Prize, and a finalist for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. His debut novel, Lake Life, was published by Simon & Schuster in 2020. His stories and essays have appeared in The American Scholar, The Atlantic Monthly, The Chicago Tribune, The New York Times, One Story, Plowshares, The Southern Review, and in numerous anthologies. He is a recipient of scholarships and fellowships from the Breadloaf, Swanee, Tin House, Wesleyan, and Longleaf Writers Conferences. He teaches in the MFA program at the University of Central Florida and lives in Orlando with his wife and daughters. And our author of the hour tonight, Margaret Kimball, is an illustrator and writer whose graphic essays have appeared in Ecotone, Black Warrior Review, Coppernickel, Diagram, and other outlets. Her work has been listed as notable in Best American Comics, and she's been a resident at both Yaddo and MacDowell Artist Colonies. Her illustrations have appeared in Smithsonian Magazine, Bravery, Boston Globe, and many major publications. She lives with her family in Indianapolis, and she's here tonight, like I said, celebrating the release of And Now I Spill the Family Secrets. It's my honor to welcome both Jamie and Margaret to the screen here, and we'll change it over. Hello, welcome both of you.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you both for joining us here tonight. I want to remind our audience that we are doing a Q&A portion of this event. So there's a chat next to the screen that you're watching us on right now. And if you type in your questions, any comments you have, you can do that throughout the program and we'll answer them later. For now, Margaret, Jamie, the show is yours.
Thanks.
Wonderful. So, Margie, do you want to begin by reading and then we'll talk some?
Yeah, I'll read for just like 10 minutes and then we can talk.
All right.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen here. And okay, can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so thank you again, Tattered Cover and McKaylee, for the intro and for having us So the book is called And Now I Spill the Family Secrets, and I'll just read the first, I think it's like 20 pages or something. Chapter 1, The Secret. My mom was 31 when she decided to take her own life. It was Mother's Day, 1988. The morning air in Connecticut was cool and calm, and she asked my dad to take the kids to church himself. She would stay home, the holiday permitting her the excuse to take time for herself. Daffodils bloomed among the ivy alongside the driveway. My dad loaded the three of us, ages 6, 4, and 10 months, into our minivan for the 1 mile drive south to St. Augustine Church just off Main Street. We were still Catholic then, but not for long. Upstairs, my mom stood in front of her bureau, looked in the mirror, and saw her own mother, a mad woman whose skin, eyes, and hair had always matched her own. I'm schizophrenic, she thought. The kids will be better off without me. She scribbled a note, grabbed her pills and a bottle of vodka, then marched up to the clapboard shed in our backyard with a black leather belt. Inside, she fastened the belt around her neck, swallowed 13 pills, and let herself drop. She was unconscious before she hit the floor. This was her first attempt. This secret was kept for 15 years until my brother Ted called one afternoon. It was early summer and I was 19. I was driving 90 miles an hour down the highway when I answered my pink flip phone. Meg, he said, did you know Mom tried to hang herself? What? When? A state trooper appeared in my rearview mirror, lights flashing. When we were kids in the shed at the old house in Glastonbury. Did you just remember something? I slowed down and swerved right. The state trooper followed. Whatever Ted said next was muffled as a memory flickered. I was maybe 4, standing in the doorway leading to our back porch, watching my father walk out of the woods. In his arms, he carried my mother in the pretty way of newlyweds, only she was limp-limbed and her eyes were closed. Asleep, I figured. My dad brushed past me, his brow furrowed as he took her upstairs to bed. In the car, I dropped speed, put a blinker on, and prepared for a ticket. The officer passed me fast on the left, a lucky break, and I stayed in the slow lane considering this memory. Ted's voice snapped me back to reality. Don't tell anyone I told you, and if I ever get like that, I want you to take a gun and shoot me in the head. Chapter 2, The Trip Home, Part 1. In 2016, 13 years after my brother spilled the secret, I bit my lip as I waited for him at the airport in Connecticut. Since Ted's phone call in 2003, I'd circled the subject of my family like a tiger chained to a pole, scratching at our history, wondering what had happened to my mom and as a result to us. My parents had kept secret that first suicide attempt for so long. What else were they hiding? What else didn't I know? A trip home meant another chance to ask questions. Ted pulled up to the curb and popped the trunk. He remained in the driver's seat, his head hung low over the cell phone cradled in his hands. A pulled-up hoodie obscured his face. His puppy lay with its head down in the passenger seat, gloomy and lethargic. In the last 2 years, Ted and I had barely spoken, and I couldn't pinpoint why. Texts between us were rare, phone calls almost non-existent. When we did speak to each other, our voices strained, like whatever we meant to say was hidden beneath a fortress of lockjawed reticence. Once, he told me I knew nothing about him, which was impossible because Ted knew the totality of my life in a way no one else ever could. We were together for the elemental moments of childhood that forever marked us. We'd trudged along muddy paths together, scooped up frogs and watched them pee defensively on our dirt-caked hands. Once, we even ran away together. We made it a half block from our house before sitting on the curb to discuss our future in serious tones. What will we eat? We asked each other. We rode the bus together every day of elementary school, and I relished the few times my teacher let me wait for dismissal with my brother in his classroom. Compared with my few friends, Ted had many, but still he was mine. Ted poured my first drink and rolled my first joint. He taught me how to drive and how to play cards. We survived the divorce together and our mom's illness. There's no one else in the world who can reduce me to the softest feelings of childhood with a single phrase, with just a look. I shoved my luggage in the trunk and buckled into the back seat. The dog stayed in front. Ted placed his cell phone on the dashboard and opened the camera app and pressed record. Something wasn't right. Are you okay? I asked. I'm targeted, he said. I'm being followed. Tears rimmed his eyes. They're following me, he said. Chapter 3, The Videos. During the troubling visit home, my mom gave me a stack of old family videos transferred from film to CD. By the time I finally sat down to watch them, another year had ticked by. One afternoon, alone at my desk, I cracked open a beer and slid a disc out from its paper case. With my husband and daughter out of the house, I inserted one of the recordings into my computer drive and pressed play. The opening shot of the film shows the entrance sign to Blish Memorial Park in Marlborough, Connecticut, where my extended family has all gathered early to celebrate both the 4th of July and my little brother's birthday in 1988. My dad first appears in the video through a crowd listening to someone off screen. He casts his eyes downward, clenches his jaw, and walks away. At my desk, I sipped beer and straightened my back, suddenly aware that I was watching us as a family, that I was about to see what we were like together before time had scattered us off to our separate lives. Playing on the screen in front of me was evidence that we'd been together, proof that we existed with clues to our disintegration. The possibility that my memories were, to whatever degree, real and verifiable. So I watched, hoping to find answers to questions I hardly had language for, about who we were during those years that shaped us. The camera pans to my mom, her black bangs teased with volume. She walks by my dad and touches his hair. He tenses and looks the other way. My dad is 29, my mom 31. They've been married for 8 years. The men all wear white collared shirts with some variation of stripes across the middle, their white socks pulled high over topsiders. Their eyeglasses are enormous, gold-rimmed and down to the middle of their cheeks. The aunts all wear khaki shorts with sweatshirts. I turned over the CD's envelope in my hand. July 2, 1988 was typed in bold across the flap. Wait a second, I thought, and pressed pause. I opened a file on my computer titled Notes and scrolled through. This file contained the missives I typed up any time my mom let slip a morsel of information about us, about herself, the kind of notes I've taken since I could hold a pencil. First suicide attempt, 1988. I picked up the phone to call her. Mom, I asked gently, do you remember the date you went to the hospital that first time? She fell silent, and I knew she understood the euphemism. I'm just watching the videos you gave me, I explained, and it occurred to me that they're from the same year. It was Mother's Day, she said like it was yesterday, May 8th, 1988. I got you dressed for church and asked your father to take you. I didn't plan to do anything. Mom, I interrupted, suddenly worried about upsetting her. It's okay, we don't have to go back there. I changed the subject. After the call, I checked the dates online. She was right. 1988, Mother's Day, May 8th, the day of a waning half moon. A younger version of me would have searched for meaning in the metaphor of a waning moon, but I was past the point of symbolism. What I wanted was to clear away the muck, to point to a date on a calendar and say this led to that, to watch a video and deconstruct the moments that led to our family's collapse and its aftermath. Here's what I knew. 2 months before this video was taken, my mom tried to hang herself in our shed. I wanted to find traces of the incident in our faces, in our movements, our interactions. So I will end there. Stop sharing, hopefully. Okay.
You got it.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Margie. I'm so honored to be doing this with you. I am a huge fan of the book. It made me weep. It's a marvel. It's a story of family, and I love stories of family. Because family they're the people that have the ability to hurt us the most, often without meaning to. And I feel like that's what your book is about. Maybe you could start off a little bit about by talking to us about what. I believe the book says you've been working on this for 15 years. What was sort of the germ of the idea for a memoir? Did you always envision it as a graphic memoir? Did you have times where you thought of writing this as essays or as a more traditional memoir? Or did you ever have thoughts of fictionalizing this?
I never had thoughts of fictionalizing it. But it started out, so a couple years after my brother called me and told me about our mom, I was in college and I took an autobiography class with Lynn Bloom, and at the end we wrote an essay, or we could write an essay or whatever. And so I was like writing all about my mom's bipolar disorder suddenly, and it was in my diary, but I had never like written about it before. But it was just text. And then from there, but I like really liked the process of writing about it because I felt like it was helping me think through and kind of reflect on what at that time was kind of still happening. But and so then from there, and then meanwhile, I was in art school. So I was like drawing these like word bubbles with all my thoughts all the time. And then they just kind of started to merge over time. And then when I got to grad school, I just started working on it as a graphic memoir. And it was always that the process changed over time, but it was always like a graphic memoir.
Okay.
So yeah, so I don't know. It just kind of slowly evolved, I guess, over time.
Yeah, and I know names were changed to protect people, but how did in the epilogue you talk about how the book was received, and it was received differently by different members of your family. But how did you kind of brace them for the book, or get them to participate with you, to let you interview them, to send you videos, to meet with you and give you their impressions of their recollections of memories?
I don't know is the real answer. I feel like they just wore down over time. Like it took us all it took me so long. Like, I don't know why. I think I just had to grow up and the process changed and I had to like figure out what I was doing. And, I think also like going from essay to book length project is like it's a different animal. So that, anyway, it took a long time. And I feel like at first, at first my parents were both sort of furious. My brothers never cared. They're just like, whatever, do whatever you want. But then over time, I was kind of like, I told my mom, it like gives her an opportunity to or I wanted her to have the opportunity to tell me her perspective so I could incorporate it. So it wasn't just me spouting off what I think happened. And she really seemed to like that. Like once she felt like not as afraid or something, I think she was just afraid of what we were going to say. Then she felt like, I think, empowered by the conversation. So, she still goes back and forth. Like, I feel like a week before the book came out, she called and was like, I don't agree with this publication. It was like, okay, like there's nothing I can do now, but okay. And my dad just hasn't read it and he's not going to. So we're just letting that be that situation.
But. Sure. Well, it's interesting because, yeah, you talk about your mom changing, but in the book, you also talk about yourself changing. I was really struck in chapter 4 by this moment where you talk about being critical of yourself at 24 for seeing your mother's story as your story. You describe yourself as, quote, hard-hearted. And so I'm just wondering how you feel you've changed in the years since. Like, what sort of softened your heart? Or you even used the word empathy there. Like, what was it that sort of opened up your capacity for empathy toward your mother?
Probably therapy. I feel like part of it is growing up, and being like, I'm a stepmom, as you know, but and it's hard. Being a parent's hard, and I feel like it's impossible. And when I think of like my age and my life stage and the things that we go through, it's like nobody, I don't know, life is hard for everyone. And I just feel like everybody gets a pass, In some ways, I still feel like mistakes were made, like by my parents, and I can point to them and be like, why did you do that? That makes no sense. But at the same time, I'm like, they did the best they could. And especially in their situation, they were so limited with like their own family resources. Like their parents weren't super helpful to them for different reasons. And so it was like, I just, over time, it's like, you just feel for them. It's like, they just did the best they could. So I think, I don't know if that's just like growing up or becoming a parent and being like, wow, you're constantly in an impossible situation. What do you do? So
Sure.
I don't know.
No, yeah, absolutely. So one of the craft kind of base question that I've wanted to ask you since I started reading the book, to me, I was a visual artist before I was a writer, not a talented one, but the thing that I found most profoundly beautiful about this graphic memoir that I haven't seen in other memoirs is the choice you make to illustrate settings, but rarely to illustrate people. Like you'll illustrate photographs, but you'll have conversations of characters in kayaks or characters in cars or characters in seats in a semicircle, but it's just the seats that are doing the talking with the word bubbles. There's like, it's a novel about people with the absence of people. Can you talk about the choice to illustrate it that way? Because I found it incredibly haunting in that choice.
Yeah, well, thanks. So, I mean, first it was just natural. Like as I just, every time I worked on it, it was like word bubbles or objects. And then of course I had to think about that choice. But, place for me is just such a strong part of memory. Like when I think back on anything, I think of the place. I don't typically see people in it. And I might see like a shirt or like something, if there was like some strong memory I have of somebody's outfit or something, I might see the outfit, but I never see a face. I never see like people talking. I don't think I really hear things. It's just visual to me, like, okay, that room or that yard or that backyard or whatever it is. So I just left it like that. And I wanted the reader to be able to kind of like immerse themselves in this space so that, like, I think when you have people, you're doing kind of these action to action panels, and so much happens of the story happens in those panel shifts. And like I had so much text, and I wanted kind of Christian, my husband, who he like talks about the mental theater of it. And so like so much of, I think, my story happens in the reader's mind because there's so much text. So I think the environment kind of creates the atmosphere and the space for them, but then they imagine hopefully themselves in that scenario, or imagine the people, the characters they're reading about or whatever. So anyway, I just think I like that kind of total immersion in an environment. And that feels most true to me in terms of memory. So I think that's why, if I answered your question.
I love that. No, yes, absolutely. I mean, that resonates with me when my students ask me, do I begin a story with plot or character or a line of dialogue? I'm always horrified. I'm like, no, you begin with setting. Like give your, like, what do you love? Where do you love in the world? Where do you want to set this thing? Start describing a place, and then put the characters into it, and they'll start doing stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Right. I mean, that's another thing is, I feel like I always love when books are so grounded in time and place. It's one of the things I loved about your book. It's like I felt like I was in like Lake Christopher, or not in the lake, but around the lake. And so I feel like, it's so strong for me too when I'm reading. Like I just want to know exactly where I am and like, what and when I am, when time is happening. But.
Absolutely, yeah. And I was just one other craft question. How did you create this? I mean, are these watercolors? Do you use some computer programming? Do you start with pencil drawing? How do you work?
Yeah, I start with pencil drawings, and then I tighten everything up once I know exactly what I want to draw. And then I ink everything on the iPad, so digitally. And then the washes are all iPad, like, okay. I don't know, washes, whatever they're called. But it's different brushes, I guess they are, in Procreate.
And is there a program that does the lettering as well?
No, that's my handwriting. So I turned my handwriting into a font to make that work. It's like an incomplete font. So sometimes it's like there's, the wrong apostrophe or something. So I had to go in and like draw it. But yeah, I did the best I could.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I just, the meticulousness of every frame and the hand lettering, I can see why it took so long to create.
Yeah. Well, the iPad saved me because I have these, I should have brought them out, but initially I was drawing everything by hand and inking everything by hand. And so every page had like 5 or 6 layers of paper, and I was scanning them all in. And then I was like, this will never end and I can't edit this. So finally I got an iPad and I was like, oh, I can do this on here. Like this works. So And now everything's digital, so it's easier. But
yeah, so so a couple more. Okay, we'll return to some of the deeper questions.
Okay.
So as much as this is like a novel about your family, you know, and it's about spilling your family secrets, it's also the story of the narrator who is searching for identity. One of the recurring things I love is in this memoir, you are Margie, sometimes you're Marjorie, you're Maggie, you're Margaret, you're Margie with a Y, Margie with an I, you're Mops and Meg. You're named after a relative who also goes by Peggy. I'm just curious, is this like creative license, or like, because I was imagining like, is this some sort of a metaphor for the search for identity, or have you really gone by all these names in your life?
I have really gone by all these names. It's like my own constant identity crisis, I guess. Like, I was Margaret. Well, no, when I was 5, I did a project, which I think I have a photograph of, but I did this whole project for kindergarten being like, call me Meg, because I had a cousin named Megan. And I thought she was just like so amazing. Like, she was always beautiful and she had the best clothes and she was always clean. I was like, I want to be Megan. So I made everybody call me Meg. And then my 2nd grade teacher nicknamed me Margie. And then that was a whole issue when I moved towns. They thought it was Maggie. Anyway, no, I don't know. So it's an interesting thing that happens to some people. Like Christian also like went by Cece and then was Christian. I feel like some people just have weird identity name crises throughout their whole lives. And I'm one of those people. But now I feel comfortable telling people like Margie, Hargie. Mm-hmm. That's it. So, but it took a while to get here.
How did the name Mops come about?
I think I was calling my dad Pops or something at one point. Like I also have given him different names. Like I called him Fav for a while, like father, but Fav. Dad, obviously. And then I was calling him Pops. And so he just started calling me Mops. And he still does.
So in another way, in a lot of ways, I think this memoir is the story of a girl coming of age by learning not to take her mother's mental illness personally, and then toward the end, not to take her brother's mental illness personally. You know, there's a great quote here where the book says, oh wait, I've got it. Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, you write about how you thought your mother thought her children weren't worth living for before you learned that, you know, illness, quote, defies logic. So I'm just curious, what advice do you give people who are also dealing with friends or close family members who have mental illness? Like how do you tell them not to take it personally, or is that something that you think, you know, everybody will always grapple with when dealing with a loved one with mental illness?
Oh, I think it's something anybody would grapple with because it's hard. I mean, I think the best thing that I struggle with every day is to try and have that kind of non-judgmental interaction where it's like, you know, if my brother tells me something now in conversation, I try really hard to just be like, okay, yeah, like that sucks, or that's hard, or that sounds really stressful or something. That isn't like a judgment one way or the other. Like I agree with him or I don't agree with him or whatever. It's just kind of that like removed thing. And it creates a distance, you know, like he, in this, for example, it's like he thinks I don't believe him sometimes with like his being followed or whatever. And he gets mad about it. And I'm like not willing to be like, I 100% believe you and I 100% don't believe you. Like I'm not willing to do that. I'm just like, you know, like I have a different perspective, or like it sounds really stressful. I believe you believe it. I think it's just really hard to find that balance. But I think what I've concluded is like having a close relationship with him is important to me. And so therefore to do that, it's like I have to take a step back and give myself that distance to like be like, this isn't about us. It's just like what he's going through, and I'm in my own life, what I'm going through, and trying to find like bridges between those two places. So I don't have good advice. I think it's hard. And I think it's like but yeah, trying not to take things personally is a good idea, probably.
Another craft question. I love the way that the memoir is structured. So you begin with this kind of inciting incident, and then we flash back. And then eventually we hit, I think, around 2001. And then there's a big gap from 2001 to, I think, like 2014 or 15. So I'm just curious if it just did nothing happen for 14 years, or did you take some editorial license? Like, I'm just curious about that choice.
Yeah, I mean, a lot happened. Let's see. I had to cut things. The book was like over contract. Like, I feel like I went 60 pages over or something. So like I did cut out some like backpacking trips that were really transformative for me. And I did a lot of stupid shit during that time as well. So that I didn't put in there. But I think I was just trying to, like, I wanted to show the childhood, like, growing up situation. And then I felt, and my editor felt like it was really important to kind of show this thread of like how my relationship with my siblings evolved over time. And it just would have been too slow, I think, to, kind of trudge through those 14 years. So I just jumped ahead to like, I would make these lists of like our memories or like strong memories I had of like things that had happened that seemed important. And so I jumped ahead to 2014 because that interaction in our house when, we all got drunk and my brother punched the table. It's like, that was kind of like a big one. And then from there, I just went out. So it was just a lot of stupid, nothing happened during that time for the most part, during that 14-year gap.
So one other thing I've been wanting to ask is one of the, to me, the most compelling sort of threads of all these family narratives is your father remarries a woman who's called Janice in the book. And we, Janice never gets to tell her side of the story, but she makes a wonderful villain for a large portion of this memoir. You really made me dislike her. But then years later, we see that her daughter is sort of joined you and your siblings, and the four of you are presented as siblings, not just as steps, which is really beautiful. So I'm just sort of curious, like, whatever happened to Janice?
She's still kicking. I don't talk to her. I will tell you, this is going on the internet, so I shouldn't say it, but I'm going to. Like, the last time I saw her was just at some, I think, an exchange or something. I don't know. Like, I guess she had stopped by my dad's house. I don't know why. And I was like, hey, how's it going? And she didn't look at me or like acknowledge that I was in the room. And I was like, all right, this is how this is going. So I don't think we'll ever speak again, which is fine with me. But yeah, she's still around. I mean, she's really close with my sister and she's been good to my sister. So that's the generous thing to say.
Nice. Yeah, so there's so much more I can ask about. One thing that jumped out at me that I was fascinated by, I'm a little older than you, but I noticed you and I were both staying in the Fort Wilderness area in Disney World in the first 2 weeks of August in 1995. So
oh my God.
It is entirely possible that we met.
We encountered each other.
Yeah. And then, of course, I loved getting to see the Danville, Kentucky apartment, which I saw.
Which you saw, yes.
It was exactly like the only addition I would add to your illustration is I remember when I was there were little fruit fly traps on the table.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
Yeah, you'd rigged up some sort of bowls of something with saran wrap and poked toothpick holes in them. And I guess that lured them in. And the next morning there were little fruit flies floating.
That's disgusting. Yes, Christian had done some internet searching. He's really good at that. And I think it's like apple cider vinegar or something you stick in the bowls. Yeah, and then you poke holes in the saran wrap. Oh, I forgot about that. That's disgusting. And that is true.
Oh no, that's my strongest memory of that apartment. I mean, it in my memory, it looks exactly the way you illustrated it, but I'm missing the bowls.
I would have, I should have talked to you. I should have sent you drawings for review. I should have added that.
So what is next for you? Do you see yourself continuing to write memoir? Do you see yourself like what do you want to do next? Or are you under contract for another book already?
I'm not under contract. I've started another book and I'm in it, but I'm taking a little bit of a break. I don't know. What do you think? Like, I feel like your first book comes out and it's a little overwhelming. And so I had started the second book, which is about some of my relationships with a few men. And I started it before the book came out. And then the book came out and I'm kind of like, I don't know how to work on this because there's so much noise all the time. But what do you suggest? Should I keep working or do I take time off? Like, what did you do after your first book?
Oh, I didn't do anything the right way. I don't have any good advice. I was trying, I was writing stories at the same time I was writing my novel, and I was constantly cheating on my novel with other stories. Yeah. And so like, I didn't, I don't know. My only advice is I heard great advice once from a writer I really like named Matt Bell. And he said, even if you can't work on your book, just make sure, at least once a day, you're just touching it. Like you're just checking in on it so that, you shouldn't feel forced to write if like you said, all those voices are occupying the space in your mind that you need to be creative, but at least just make sure that you don't give yourself such distance from the project that you lose the passion or the impetus or whatever it was that allowed you to stay, shackled to the book.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's good advice. I'm also giving myself an excuse because I'm so pregnant right now that I'm just like, I'm pregnant, I'm tired, I can't do this. But I think that's good advice though. I should keep kind of at least looking at it, thinking about it.
Well, I look forward to whatever's next and to the baby. And now we are going to turn this back over to McKaylee, who has Q&A from our audience.
Yes, and I would say that's actually great advice. We get a lot of different craft questions that come on here, and given our connection to Rocky Mountain fiction writers and Lighthouse writers, that it's always really great to share a variety of advice. And so, Jamie, please feel free to jump in, which actually, believe it or not, one of our first questions on here is for both of you. I've read and loved both of your books. What do you think was most important when you moved from shorter forms like essays and stories to book-length narratives?
Jamie, you should answer that first. Like you did a better job of it.
I made the mistake early on of thinking that a novel was just like a long story, and it's not. it's not, not just because there's a big difference between 30 pages and 300 pages, but also because, the fun thing about writing a story or an essay is that I feel like I've gotten to the point after 15 years of writing that I can kind of hold everything in my head at once. Like if I'm working at something under 30 pages, I can keep all the narrative strands in my head. I can remember if I've already used like the word cerulean on page 2, I'm not going to use it again in the piece. Then when you write a novel, or I imagine a memoir, you read your 500 pages and you're like, I repeated myself so many times, or I left out things I swear I wrote, or like this thing, it doesn't make any sense. So they're two totally different art forms to me. And so I think we have to be careful, especially, I teach in a writing program. I know a lot of writers are trained in MFA programs. I think we have to be careful not to tell students that essays are training wheels for memoirs or stories are training wheels for novels. They're just different forms with their own unique challenges. And for me, learning to write a novel was as much work as learning to write a story because it's a different beast. But how about you, Margie?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, so in my grad program, we did essays. So everything's self-contained in like 20 to 30 pages. And you have this like really short arc and the expectations are different. I think when you go to an essay, it's not a real huge commitment of, an hour or half an hour or something. Whereas when you ask somebody to read your book, it's like a much longer commitment. And so I think what I had to learn was actually fiction techniques, like plot and momentum, like things we had never talked about. I don't even know what we talked about in grad school because honestly, but actually we went through the same program. We should talk about that sometime. Anyway, so I feel like I had to learn how to develop characters, how to have dialogue, how to describe place if I wasn't showing the place, and then, but the biggest thing was momentum for me. It's like, how do you end a chapter and not tell the whole story in a chapter. I think like my initial drafts had each chapter like basically told my entire life story, like at a different house or something. And then it's like, that doesn't work. So it's, you know, and YA books help me so much too, actually reading with Stella. It's like, you just, because the end of every chapter is a cliffhanger. And so I was like, okay, how can I do that while still being true to the narrative, but like try to make these little like moments that you want to keep reading. That was like really challenging. But I think that's what I learned over several years.
No, that's great. That's wonderful. In a similar vein, what did your research process look like? Did you have to go back and look at places or pictures of places? Who did you talk to? What did that look like for this particular book?
Yeah, so I went back to Connecticut a bunch of times, and my family doesn't live in the same area I grew up in, but I would just drive through. I'd borrow a car and like drive through there. I made my poor husband come with me and like take pictures of all these different houses and stuff a bunch of times. You know, my favorite part of the research was like kind of online. So I found these archives where, for example, a library had one of the libraries in Connecticut had old admission records of one of the hospitals my grandmother stayed at, and I contacted an archivist and got access to those records. And so that kind of stuff where I could find public record was like my total favorite. And it didn't occur to me to even search through public records until like a few years ago. You know, like I worked in the project for so long, and then I was like, wait a second, like I can find all these documents. Like my mom happened to, we were trying to get Italian citizenship, and she handed over divorce papers. So I got to read my parents' divorce papers. I got to read the custody studies. You know, like it was awesome. So I loved all that stuff. Like the public record stuff was really cool.
Yeah, and I feel like your memoir does a great job of showing you almost rediscovering your own childhood, like learning about the things you didn't understand then. Like you researched yourself by researching your parents, like, and were reminded of the things you went through, and then matched those up to your diaries. And it's sort of like you researched yourself.
Well, it's such a fun thing to do, because it's like you write your diaries and you're like, or you have your memories and you're like, what's real? Like I was a kid, maybe I'm misremembering, or I was being dramatic or whatever. And then you like find a timeline that's like public record, and you're like, I wasn't making that up. That really did happen. Or like, wow, it was worse than I thought, or it wasn't as bad or whatever. And it's like, to me, that just felt so validating, because I feel like, especially when you have parents who don't really want to talk about this stuff, or who's like my mom, it's like anytime I talk to her, story changes a little bit, or I mean, anybody you talk to about a memory, it's like, anyway, so to me, it was really satisfying to like pinpoint dates and places and times and all that. So I recommend anyone spend time doing that.
It's a great resource for sure. This one's a really fascinating one to me. What do you take away as a future parent, or as a parent, with how you tell or let your kids in on familial secrets? Do you wish the story could be redone at all? Redone is in quotes.
I mean, my approach, so I have a stepdaughter now who's 10, and then I'm gonna have a baby. I've told my stepdaughter she can write anything she wants, and I just tell her, you know, for example, about this book, she's like, why we haven't let her read it. I think we will. And I was just like, you know, my mom tried to kill herself a few times. Like I was just like, and it's like hard to read about. And like my parents get divorced, and I just kind of told her. And she's like, okay. Because there was like, I didn't want to tell her. I'm like, I'm not gonna say that. And then I was like, wait a second, like that's exactly the problem with my family, is like my parents wouldn't talk about these things. So I've just been really open with her as much as I can. And I'm like, you know, she's young, so I don't want to like overexpose her to things. But I also just feel really strongly like we don't have secrets. It's like she wants information, I'm going to give it to her and try not to traumatize her. So I just feel really open. I think being open is so important. I think I wouldn't have had this urge to make this book had my parents just been open with me about things, but they weren't. And so I felt like I had to go digging around for information.
No, absolutely. So. I think there's something also to be said that, kids can handle information, you know what I mean? And it helps
Yeah.
them being able to have it sometimes at earlier ages, figure out what their process looks like, and there's something to be said for telling what may or may not be called secrets early on, and it's a
Yeah.
really interesting thing that your book brings up thematically, of what it is later, what would be different if you found out sooner, and
Yeah.
it's
I
just,
think it helps develop those relationships because it's like
yeah.
if otherwise it just feels like this divide and this distance and like the parent doesn't trust the kid with this information or whatever. Whereas I'm just like constantly looking for closeness with her and it's like I just have to be open and tell her things. I can't keep like, withhold information because if I do, she senses it and then it's a distance. So yeah, I'm also like a blurter if you can't tell. So
You're doing great. No worries here. So this is such a fascinating book in general, but why a graphic novel, and what draws you to that art form in general?
I mean, I don't know. I always drew pictures from the time I was little, and I all the programs I went through were in the art program. So when I went to grad school, I went for art. And then I eventually went into the writing program, but I started out in the visual art program. So I don't know. It's like, why do people want to draw? I don't know the answer to that big question. It's just what I've always done. And it makes me sad. Like there was a point where my agent was like, "Do you have to illustrate this?" And I was like, I just felt so sad, feeling like, "Oh, I guess I don't have to." But then I was like, it wouldn't be me if I didn't. Um, so I love books that have pictures in them.
No, it's just a part of who you are. That's a
Yeah.
perfectly acceptable answer. So one of the last questions that we have here is one that we like to ask often at Tattered Cover, and it's for both of you actually. For Jamie, you as a reader of the book, and for Margaret, you as the writer here. But what did this book, and now I spill the family secrets, teach you? And I'd love it if Jamie could go first, and then we'll end with our author of the hour here.
Oh yeah. For me, the line that resonated most, and I forget where in the book this is, but there's this great line where you say, intimacy ricochets off unpredictability. Do you remember that line, Margie?
Yeah.
And that hit me so hard because I realized that there have been a number of relationships that I have ended, or that I don't trust people because I can't handle unpredictability. Like unpredictable people scare me, and I can't form like a lasting intimacy with someone if I can't trust that they're not going to hurt me. And so like that line is like such a great line that I was like, oh, I totally feel that because I do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that is hard. Okay, so sorry. So the question, Michaela, is what did you learn?
What did the book teach you, Margaret?
Yeah.
It can be about yourself as a writer, or anything you want to mention, however you want to interpret that. But what did you learn from this book?
I think I just learned to kind of be at peace with the relationships in my family. Like the book was really like a big healing process for me, or making it was. And I think forcing myself to kind of always try and take the most empathetic view. I don't think I would have done that without writing a book, because you're just in your own head. It's like, why would I sit there and be like, oh, why was my stepmom good to me? Like, in what ways was she good to me? I might not have done that. So I think the book taught me how to like rigorously like examine each relationship or each person and be like, okay, in what way did they do the best they could do? And like kind of take that approach to thinking about them rather than just being angry or feeling hurt or whatever it was. So it's for like a really personal answer. Like it's not really helpful for anybody, but
Thank you for your candor. Thank you for your honesty. And I think that's the thing about this book and this conversation, is that it's something that all of us can relate to. We might not have the same family secrets, and it might be a generational thing, but I think at least on this call and other people watching it can relate to that idea of division in family and that unpredictability. And what that causes in us as adults. And
Yeah.
it's a very different experience, but a human one for us. And so thank you for having the courage to write the story. Thank you for having the courage to spill your family secrets. And I don't mean that in a punny way, but in the sense of like, it's very true. It's a hard thing to do. And we're gifted with this book because of that courage. So thank you. And I want to encourage everyone to get their copies of And Now I Spill the Family Secrets by Margaret Kimball. Yes, thank you for holding up. Thank you for showing the beautiful cover, because goodness, such an intriguing cover, and the best title as well. And I want to give each of you a chance, Jamie and Margaret, to remind people who you are, where they can find you online, and anything else that you want to say before we close out tonight. And Jamie, again, I'm going to ask you to start, and we'll end with the author of And Now I Spill the Family Secrets, Margaret Kimball. So Jamie.
Okay. Oh, so just who I am?
Yeah, like who you are, where they can find you online, anything else?
Oh, sure. Yeah, my name is Jamie, but my author name is David James Poissant. I'm the author of The Heaven of Animals and more recently of Lake Life. Lake Life, my first novel, comes out in paperback next month, first Tuesday in July, available wherever books are sold, including, I hope, Tattered Cover. And yeah, and you can see me online, www.davidjamespoissant.com.
And Margaret?
I'll just plug Jamie's book. Like, I was late to the game, but I just read the hardcover version of Lake Life and thought it was a lovely family story. And it also ends with, well, I can't give anything away, but I'll say there's a lot of family secrets that kind of come out. So I would recommend people buy and read that. But yeah, I'm Margaret Kimball. I think probably the most interesting place to see me on the internet is on Instagram, which is just my name with an underscore.
Well, thank you both so much. And I'm McKaylee with Tattered Cover Bookstore. You can follow us on social media at Tattered Cover, which is on all of our handles, or see us on tatteredcover.com, where you can order copies of both of these fabulous authors' books, Lake Life and Now I Spill the Family Secrets. We thank you all so much for shopping locally and supporting local independent bookstores. It's the reason that we're here. So thank you for keeping us in your communities. If both of you will stick around while I close out. This has been Tattered Cover with Margaret Kimball and David James Poissant. Poissant? I was joking with them earlier. I don't do French at all. But we are here talking about And Now I Spill the Family Secrets, which you can get online at tatteredcover.com. Thank you all for joining us. Stay safe, everybody, and happy reading. Good night, all. And we're